Yo, Chelsea have just announced that they've parted ways with Mauricio Pochettino after just 11 months in charge at the club, and I can't help but feel disappointed. I'm not a Chelsea fan, I'm a Liverpool fan, so my knowledge of the ins and outs of Chelsea Football Club is by no means encyclopedic, but I did want to record this video not so much to cover his departure, but to offer what I think is a really strong defence of a manager that never really seemed to get the credit that he deserved this season. First off, let's address the fact that Chelsea spent over £400 million on new, mostly young, inexperienced players since Pochettino's arrival. What's rarely mentioned is that they did sell almost £250 million worth of players, including senior pros that won major honours with the club, such as club captain Cesar Azpilicueta, N'Golo Kante and Mateo Kovacic. Let's look at some of the players that they signed last summer, starting with the much maligned Nicolas Jackson. Before joining Chelsea, Jackson started just 16 games for Villarreal in the La Liga last season, Villarreal who finished 5th. This season, he started almost double the number of games, leading the line for a huge club like Chelsea. Axel Disasi, by no means a household name, but certainly a promising young defender with limited experience at the top level, I think it's fair to say. He did play 3 full seasons in Liga with Monaco, so perhaps it depends on your interpretation of top level football. Last season, Monaco finished 6th and had the worst defensive record in the top half of the table. Cole Palmer, it's easy to forget that before signing for Chelsea, he only started 3 Premier League games. Moises Caicedo, at 21 years old, was actually one of their signings with the most Premier League experience, and he had only played 1 full season of football at this level. I will get to Christopher Nkunku and Romeo Lavia when I speak about the injuries in more detail, but Chelsea also signed 25-year-old Robert Sanchez for €28 million. 19-year-old Leslie Ugochukwu for €27 million, 18-year-old David Washington for €16 million, 18-year-old Angelo for €18 million, and 23-year-old Jordi Petrovic for €14 million. The oldest player that they signed, bearing in mind the wealth of experienced players they sold, was 25 years old. So at this point, before I get into the injuries, what did people honestly expect Mauricio Pochettino to achieve this season? Did people just think, well, these owners have spent over €1 billion, they must win something? As extortionate as that number is, it guarantees you absolutely nothing, and context is important. In total this season, Chelsea had a league high total of 58 injuries, with players missing a combined 309 games as a result. That's 50 more games than Newcastle in 2nd place. Their captain and arguably the best player, Reece James, has been injured for the majority of the season. Wesley Fofana, who they signed from Leicester for around £75 million, hasn't played a single minute all season. Romeo Lavia, who they signed in a deal worth a reported £60 million, has missed 28 games. And Christopher Nkunku, their marquee attacking signing, was unavailable for 39 games this season as a result of 3 separate injuries. They're the most injury-stricken club in the division. Fact. I've always thought that 2 ways to gauge a new manager is if the team improves over the course of the season and if players improve under their management. Of course, you could argue that young players, for example, are always going to improve if they play enough games, and I think that's a fair argument, but Pep Guardiola is often lauded for his role in Phil Foden's development, Klopp and Trent Alexander-Arnold's, and Arteta and Bukayo Saka's. But how often do we hear Mauricio Pochettino praised for his role in Cole Palmer's wonderful season? If anything, I actually hear more praise for Pep in his development than Pochettino's. Aside from Cole Palmer, I think it's fair to say that most of Chelsea's new signings did struggle in the beginning, but they've all improved, especially Jackson and Caicedo. I wasn't Jackson's biggest fan for the first half of the season or so, but he did win me over with several of his performances, and I was always a huge fan of Moises Caicedo. I'm still upset actually that Liverpool didn't sign him. Have this Chelsea team improved over the course of the season? Undoubtedly. This calendar year, Chelsea have won 10 of their 18 games, putting them comfortably as the 4th best team in the league during that time, just 5 points behind Liverpool and with a game in hand. Even if you consider the last 32 games of the 38 game season, Chelsea are in the top 4. So a shaky start for a new manager inheriting an incredibly young and experienced and injury-stricken squad. Surely it's understandable. In this season past, Chelsea reached an FA Cup semi-final and outplayed the best team in the world in defeat. They lost out to Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final, a game which they seemed to have in their hands at one point, and they finished 6th in the Premier League above both Newcastle and Manchester United. 2 teams that have played Champions League football this season and whose managers have been there for at least 1 full season before they kicked off in August. You could argue that failing to get over the lines in those games against Manchester City and Liverpool in particular is a sign of a team that that can't get over the line, or a manager that's always the bridesmaid and never the bride. But I'll say it again, context is important. How many of those Chelsea players have experience playing in those sorts of games? Very few. I think that's all for me. I appreciate that that was more of a rant than I would have liked it to be, but it's very late and I was planning on having an early night before this news dropped. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Chelsea fans, are you sorry to see Mauricio Pochettino go, or are you fist pumping the air like Roy Jennings? Lastly, please give the video a like if you liked it and consider subscribing for more football related content. I do have a video on Liverpool's new manager, Arne Slot in the works. It's coming out later this week. So yeah, subscribe if you're interested. And lastly, thank you so much for watching.